Alright everybody, so we have a few viruses left to talk about, then protozoa and helminths. Helminths I think are second best to viruses. So as far as I remember, we were talking about influenza last time, but so next one is the best viruses. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. The best viruses are flaviviruses. So flavi comes from the Latin, I think it's Latin for yellow, and there are three broad categories. I'm going to split them into three categories based on the type of disease that they cause. And of course, there's no way I cover all flaviviruses here, okay? So first category are hemorrhagic fevers. Just like Ebola, these viruses cause hemorrhagic fevers, not as bad. And there are going to be two viruses, yellow fever and dengue virus. Then here at the center, we're going to have encephalitis. So three encephalitic viruses that, and it's not complete. There are more encephalitic flaviviruses. It's West Nile, of course, everybody knows that one. Japanese encephalitis. And tick-borne encephalitis. And finally, non-hemorrhagic fever, just fevers basically, Zicovir. Also pretty famous. So let's talk about transmission first. I'm going to do a lot of color coding here. So some of these viruses are transmitted by mosquitoes. That's going to be yellow fever, dengue, West Nile, Japanese encephalitis, and Zicovir. Okay, all of those are mosquito transmitted. I'm not going to put here next to tick-borne encephalitis that it is transmitted by ticks. I think, the name kind of implies, right? Now, some of these viruses infections can be prevented by vaccination. So there are vaccines. There is a vaccine against yellow fever. There is a vaccine against Japanese encephalitis, and there is a vaccine against TB. Common question, do we have vaccine against dengue? We used to, but it's not approved anymore because it didn't work the way we wanted. So there are some dengue vaccines in the works. West Nile virus, there is a vaccine that is specifically for veterinary, particularly horse use. And it's a thriving industry, okay?
Why do you think they haven't been able to make one for humans?
Because nobody gives a slightest fuck about humans in terms of West Nile virus, because we have like 50 cases a year. Nobody's gonna buy it, okay? And this is something to kind of, so yellow fever was one of the first vaccines ever developed. It was developed in 1932 by Max Tyler, and it was a complete lottery. So he was just passaging virus through mice and rabbits and came out good. And it was approved since then. The funniest part about yellow fever vaccine is that by modern standards, it would never get approval. But by the standards in 1932, it was okay, and it's extremely effective, it's extremely safe, like unbelievably safe. And to give you an idea how important these two infections are, approximately 2.5 billion people live in the areas where these infections can be transmitted between humans. And this kind of brings us to another question, direct or indirect transmission. So remember, direct transmission implies the transmission from person to person. So we've got yellow fever, being directly transmitted from human to human. It can be dengue and Zika virus. So for those viruses, the person who is sick can be bitten by a mosquito, and mosquito will transfer the infection to another person. We clear? There are examples of transmission from monkeys to humans for yellow fever, dengue, and Zika, but the main contribution, again, from person to person. These three viruses are not transmitted. So these three aren't transmitted from person to person. Does that make sense? So West Nile, for instance, is transmitted by mosquitoes from birds to humans. Japanese encephalitis and tick-borne encephalitis, these are transmitted from rodents and deer to humans. But like if I'm sick with tick-borne encephalitis, that's it, that end. Virus doesn't go from me anywhere. We clear? For these groups, the encephalitis and hemorrhagic fever, it's called biphasic disease. So what does that mean? The easiest way is to present it, how would a case look like? Let's say you travel to Southeast Asia, get infected with dengue virus, okay? What you're going to develop, most likely, so-called dengue fever, which dengue stands for break bone. When you read about this, it says usually flu-like symptoms. As one American military serviceman told my former boss, when he had dengue fever, if he physically could reach for the gun, he would shoot himself. It's so bad. Like everything hurts, every bone and every muscle in your body hurts. But then people recover, that's the first phase, and that's it. For overwhelming majority, that's it. And such course of infection is true for yellow fever, dengue, West Nile, Japanese encephalitis, tick-borne encephalitis. You have really bad fever for the first phase, and usually you fine after that. Very small percentage, though, will progress to the second phase. In case of yellow fever and dengue, that's going to be hemorrhagic fever. In case of West Nile, Japanese encephalitis, or tick-borne encephalitis, that would be encephalitic disease. Does that make sense to you? Zicovir is slightly different. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. I don't think it deserves our time, really. It was a big story in 2017. Shameless plug, there is a YouTube video. I delivered a small, about 50-minute talk here at Lakeland, kind of explaining that it's not something we have to be terribly concerned about. This virus in adults causes conjunctivitis, headaches, rash, and basically it. But in pregnant women, it may result in the birth of microcephalic babies. So it impacts the development of a fetus, and they're born with microcephaly. It's pretty well established. So now it's basically the outbreak of Zika in South America kind of burned out. Okay? Questions? Okay.